The brand new wrought iron fence was a monstrosity of black steel and arrogant design. 8 feet tall and stretching as far as I could see in either direction. And right in the middle of it, where the entrance to my own private lane had been for 100 years, was a heavy, automated gate. It was closed. A truck, towing a trailer with a nervous young bull inside, was idling on the pristine asphalt of a world I didn't belong to, completely blocked from my own home. "You'll have to go around, Sam," a voice called out, dripping. With smug satisfaction, it was Doris, the president of the Golden Meadow Estates Homeowners Association. She was standing on the other side of the gate, arms crossed, looking like a general who had just won a decisive battle. "Go around where?" "Doris?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "This is the only way in or out of my ranch. You know that? I have a legal easement." "Not anymore," she said with a triumphant little smile. "The board has voted to secure the community perimeter. Your farm traffic," she said the words like they were a disease, "is no longer welcome on our private roads. You can submit an application for access, and the board will consider it on a case-by-case basis." My hands gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. A prisoner. She had made me a prisoner on my own land. The bull in the trailer bellowed, a long, mournful sound that echoed my own trapped rage. And that's when everything went wrong. Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment. What would you do if this happened to you? And subscribe to HOA Files. To understand that gate, you have to understand the land it sits on. My story isn't about a house. It's about the dirt. My name is Sam Evans, and my family has been on this piece of Texas hill country since before it was Texas. We've ranched it, farmed it, bled on it, and buried our dead in it for 5 generations. The original homestead, the 50 acres I still live on with the old stone ranch house and the main barn, is the heart of that history. But time is a relentless force. By the 1980s, my grandfather was facing hardships. Ranching wasn't paying the bills and property taxes were skyrocketing. Developers were circling like vultures. He was a shrewd man, my grandfather. He knew he couldn't save all of it, but he devised a plan to save the heart of it. He didn't sell the land. Instead, he created a 99-year land lease for the 500 acres of prime pasture land that surrounded our homestead. He sold the development rights to a Houston-based company. They could build their houses, their roads, their little suburban paradise, but they would never, ever own the dirt beneath their feet. The payments from that lease went into a family trust, a trust I now manage. Those payments are what have kept our ranch afloat, allowing me to continue our family's legacy. It was a deal with the devil, maybe, but it was a deal that saved our home. In the center of the sprawling, manicured development of Golden Meadow Estates, my 50-acre ranch remained an island of private, deeded property, a living piece of history, and then Doris moved in. The new residents of Golden Meadow were mostly wealthy retirees and executives from the city. They bought their $500,000 homes and likely never read the fine print in their mountain of closing documents, part that explained they were on leased land. They saw me in my dusty truck and worn boots, not as the steward of the land they lived on, but as a relic, a nuisance. And Doris became their queen. She was elected HOA president on a platform of protecting our investment and enhancing community aesthetics. To her, my ranch was the single greatest threat to both. The sight of my cattle grazing near the property line, the sound of my tractor at dawn, the faint, earthy smell of a working ranch on the breeze, these were not signs of heritage and authenticity. They were insults to her, sanitized perfectly. Curated world from the beginning, her attacks were focused on my access. The original private lane to my ranch house now cut directly through her precious community. It was a recorded deeded easement, an ironclad legal right that was part of the original development plan. But to Doris, it was a scar on the face of her perfect neighborhood. The first official shot came in the form of a letter on thick, creamy HOA letterhead. It was a formal demand that I immediately pave and landscape my half-mile dirt lane to meet the aesthetic standards of the Golden Meadow community. It would have cost me over $100,000. I wrote a polite letter back, explaining that the lane was my private property, not subject to HOA rules, and enclosed a copy of my recorded easement. I thought the legal document would be enough. I was wrong. It was like showing a crucifix to a bulldozer. A few weeks later, large, ostentatious signs appeared at the entrance to my lane. Private community, nitrogen, monoxide, commercial, or agricultural traffic. Residents only. I wasn't commercial traffic, and I was the original resident, so I ignored them. But it was a clear escalation, a public branding of me as an outsider. The petty war had begun. The HOA board, with Doris at the helm, passed a new rule. Clearly aimed directly at me. All non-paved access lanes are hereby designated for emergency and special use only, subject to board approval. The next morning, there was a thick, rusty chain padlocked between two new posts, blocking my lane. I didn't even hesitate. I went to my barn, got my bolt cutters, and snipped through that chain in about 5 seconds. I tossed the pieces onto the manicured grass of the HOA common area and went about my day. My grandfather hadn't faced down droughts and cattle barons just for me to be stopped by a chain. My act of defiance was met with a furious response. I received a bill in the mail for $500 for the damaged community property, along with a fine for another $1,000 for willful destruction of HOA property. Attached was a threatening letter from their lawyer, a man from a big, expensive Houston firm, warning me that any further interference with community security measures would be met with swift and severe legal action. The threat of a lawsuit was real. That was a language I didn't speak, a battle fought on a field I didn't know. They had a war chest funded by the dues of 200 wealthy homeowners. I had the ranch, which was land rich but cash poor. For the first time I felt a flicker of fear, felt cornered. My inner monologue was a storm of frustration. These people, these tenants, were living on my family's legacy, and they had the gall to try and sue me for accessing my own home. The disrespect was so profound it was almost breathtaking. While I was consulting my own small-town lawyer, a good man who was frankly outgunned, Doris made her final move. The HOA sent out a notice for a special assessment. Every homeowner was to be charged an extra $2,000 to fund a massive community beautification and security perimeter project. I didn't think much of it at the time. I wasn't a member. It didn't apply to me. Then the survey crews arrived. They started putting up stakes for a new fence line. A beautiful, expensive, 8-foot-tall wrought iron fence that would encircle the entire development. I watched them, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. I saw them putting stakes right across the entrance to my lane. Wall me in. And that's how I ended up in my truck, with a bull in the trailer, staring at a cold, impassable steel gate where my freedom used to be. Doris stood on the other side, the architect of my imprisonment, looking utterly, placidly triumphant. I was forced to turn my large rig around in her perfect cul-de-sac, drive back to the main road, and find a friendly neighbor outside the development who let me keep my new bull in his pasture for the night. I had to leave my truck and trailer and walk the 2 miles back to my own ranch, letting myself in through a small pedestrian gate they had, mercifully, not yet locked. I felt like a trespasser on my own land. She had one. Was completely cut off, a prisoner in my own home, the king of a 50-acre jail cell. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't pace. I didn't fume. My anger had cooled and hardened into something cold, quiet, and absolute. My grandfather had been a fighter, a planner. He had faced down bigger bullies than Doris, and he had left me the ammunition for this exact fight. I went to his old roll-top desk, the one in the corner of a living room that I rarely opened. Inside, in the back of the bottom drawer, was a heavy, leather-bound portfolio. It was embossed with the family brand. I untied the leather straps and opened it. Inside, perfectly preserved, was the original 99-year masterland lease agreement. For the entirety of Golden Meadow Estates, I spent the next 4 hours reading it. Read every word, every clause, every subsection. It was a masterpiece of legal foresight. My grandfather had thought of everything, and then I found it. Section 14. Covenants of Access. Paragraph C. My heart began to beat a little faster. It read, the lessee, its successors, and assigns which shall include any subsequent homeowners association, shall not now or ever impede, obstruct, bar, gate, or in any other manner, interfere with the lessor's free, unimpeded, and unrestricted 24-hour access to the retained property, the Evans family homestead, via the access lane as designated on the master plat. This covenant is absolute and may not be amended. That was the shield. But the next paragraph, that was the sword. Penalty for breach. Upon any verified breach of the covenant of access, as described in Section 14C, the lessor, the Evans Family Trust, shall have the immediate and unequivocal right to assume temporary administrative control of all primary, ingress and egress points to the leased premises for the sole and express purpose of ensuring the lessor's own access until such a time as the breach is remedied to the lessor's satisfaction. I read it again and again. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. He had thought of it. The old man had actually foreseen this exact scenario. If they locked my gate, the lease gave me the keys to theirs. My first call at 7 a.m. was to my lawyer, the man who represented the family trust. I read him the clauses. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone, and then a low whistle. "Sam," he said, his voice full of awe, "your granddaddy was a stone-cold genius." We set the plan in motion. The next morning, just as the sun was casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of Golden Meadow, 2 vehicles arrived at the grand, ostentatious main entrance to the development. The first was my lawyer's sleek sedan. The second was a van from the top commercial security and locksmith company in the county. I was there, waiting for them in my truck. We didn't have to wait long. Doris must have seen us on the security. Cameras, her white SUV, came flying down the main boulevard and screeched to a halt inside the gate. She burst out, her face a mask of furious confusion. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice echoing in the quiet morning. "You are not authorized to be here. You're trespassing. I'm calling the police." My lawyer, a calm, silver-haired man named Mr. Davies, simply stepped forward and handed her a thick, formally drafted legal notice. "Ma'am, please read this," he said politely. "I'm not reading anything. Get off our property," she shrieked. "I'm afraid you're mistaken about whose property you're on," Mr. Davies said, his voice still perfectly calm. "Ms. Doris, pursuant to Section 14, in paragraph C of the Master Land Lease Agreement for this entire 500-acre property, your homeowners association has committed a material breach of the terms of the lease. You did this yesterday when you willfully obstructed my client's access to his private homestead." Doris stared at him, her face a blank canvas of confusion. "Land lease? What on earth are you talking about? We own our homes." "I have a deed." "No, ma'am," Mr. Davies said, delivering the line with surgical precision. "You have a deed for the building. The land itself, the very ground your house is sitting on, is owned by the Evans Family Trust. You and every other resident in this development are, in the simplest terms, tenants on a 99-year lease." The color drained from Doris's face. She looked like she had been struck by lightning. Mr. Davies continued, his voice relentless. "By blocking my client's gate, you have triggered the penalty clause for breach of access. My client is now legally exercising his right to assume administrative control of all primary ingress and egress points. These gentlemen," he said, gesturing to the security technicians who were already opening up the gate's master control panel, "are here to reprogram the system. The locks on the manual overrides are also being changed." The technicians worked quickly. They disabled the existing key codes, the remote signals, everything. They installed a new master controller and changed the physical locks. The entire process took less than 30 minutes. When they were done, the lead technician handed me a single, heavy-duty key and a small remote control. Doris just stood there, speechless as the truth of her catastrophic miscalculation crashed down upon her. She had picked a fight with a fellow resident only to discover she had actually been trying to evict her own landlord. I walked over to the sleek, stainless steel call box, the one visitors were supposed to use. I pressed the button, and a pleasant chime rang out. After a moment, I held down the talk button. I looked directly at Doris, her face a mask of dawning, apocalyptic horror, and I said, my voice calm and clear in the morning air, "Welcome to Golden Meadow Estates. This is the landlord speaking. How can I help you?" The chaos was immediate and absolute. No one's remotes worked. No one's gate codes worked. A long line of Mercedes and BMWs began to form outside the gate, unable to leave. Residents trying to return from their morning jogs were locked out. The entire community of 200 homes, a population of hundreds of people, was completely sealed off from the outside world. And the only way in or out was through me. My phone started ringing. It was my lawyer. "The HOA's attorney is on my other line," he said, a hint of laughter in his voice. "He's apoplectic." I spent the rest of the day in my truck parked by the gate. I let people in and out, of course. I wasn't a monster, but I did it on my own time. A resident would buzz. I'd ask their name and destination. Make a note of it on a legal pad. Then I'd press the button. It was orderly, and it was maddening for them. The news of the land lease, of who I really was, spread through the community like a shockwave. Doris became a pariah overnight. She was the one who had, through her own arrogance and spite, brought their world to a grinding halt and revealed the uncomfortable truth that their exclusive estates were built on rented land. They held an emergency board meeting that night on the lawn by the gate. Since they couldn't get to the clubhouse, it was a vicious, shouted affair. They voted Doris out of the presidency in a unanimous public shaming. The next morning, a new, humbled, terrified-looking man, the interim president, approached my truck, hat in hand. "Mr. Evans," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "please, we are so sorry. What do we have to do to fix this?" I had my terms ready. The immediate and complete removal of the fence and gate blocking my lane at their expense. A formal public apology from the HOA to be mailed to every resident. Full reimbursement for my legal fees. And finally, they were to pay a $100,000 penalty fine to the Evans Family Trust for the material breach of contract. A figure my lawyer had found stipulated in the lease for just such an occasion. They agreed to everything. They had no choice. Within 48 hours, a demolition crew had torn down the brand new fence and gate. My lane was clear. Check for the fine and my legal fees was delivered by a courier. I, in turn, handed over the new master codes and keys for the main gate to the new board president. I stood on my porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air was still. The only sounds were the crickets and the lowing of my cattle. My peace had been shattered, but I had fought for it and won it back. This whole ugly business taught me a lesson my grandfather had tried to instill in me long ago. The land is the only thing that matters, people. Come and go. Houses are built and torn down, but the land endures. Doris was so obsessed with building her perfect little kingdom of rules and appearances, she never bothered to check the foundation she was building it on. She thought she was a queen in her castle, when all along she was just a guest in my house. The new board is much more respectful now, even friendly. But I just got a notice in the mail that the county is planning to reassess the property taxes on the main gate's access road. And they've listed the official owner as the Evans Family Trust.